Mr. Eastwood, talk to us. How did you first hear about the project, and what the connection that you most responded to was?
Well, I knew they were going to make this picture. I had read in the trades that they were going to make it, and so I thought I'd read the book. But I knew somebody else was doing it, so I didn't think too much of it. I just read it for fun, and then all of a sudden, while I'm reading it, Dan Feldman from Warner Brothers calls me up and said, they've known about Chris Kyle and all this stuff. I'm reading the book right now. And he said, well, would you be interested in doing it? And I said, wait a second, somebody else is doing it. No, that fell through, and we'd like you to consider it. So I said, well, let me finish the last 30 pages. I'll call you right back. So I did. Sat down and finished them, called them right back. But it was an interesting thing, and I thought a guy who's killed 160 people, that's only the affirmed ones, the ones affirmed by a senior officer, confirmed rather, I said. I thought, that guy's got to have some baggage in there, and he's got to have some thoughts about it, and how does a person feel like that, and how do you, when does it become, do you do it for fun? I mean, or what are your reactions? I mean, everybody would probably go through different periods that way. In fact, one of my favorite scenes in the picture was at the end when he's talking to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is asking him, did you ever think you did some things that you regret while you were over there? And Bradley says, no, I go to my maker confident, but you look at his eyes and you can tell he's not quite telling the truth.
Right. Jason, I believe you have some background as an actor yourself, and so I wonder, does that inform the way that you write characters for others to portray? Can you I imagine it must. All life experiences probably play into it, but is that one of them?
I am interested in character first. I come from that background, certainly, and I'm interested in mythology. I'm interested in the hero's journey. And for Chris, it was important to create that and to jumpstart it off the bat. This was a war that, we had a lot of feelings about. This country has a lot of feelings about that war. And so for me, it was, if we could centralize a moral dilemma for this character off the top of the movie, jumpstart him and the audience into this and say, look, there's a lot more to this than you know. For these guys, a lot goes into this. These guys come back with a lot of baggage, and it's not necessarily the blood, it's not necessarily the guts, but it's this moral dilemma that they face as soldiers every day, to do what they came here to do what they know is right, but right gets really gray when you get over there. And, I love the idea of this sheepdog who goes over there, and this sheepdog is doing what he can, but then it turns into like losing friends and vengeance, and the sheepdog becomes that he's hunting it at one point in the movie, and he becomes the wolf, and how he finds his way back from that is really gratifying, and it wasn't something that I had to make up,
Now, where in the process, where was everybody here in the process when you got the news that this terrible tragedy had happened and he had been killed? How far along was the project, and where, how did it? Obviously, first and foremost, it's just a terrible thing. But in terms of telling its story, how did you then move forward?
I had been in communication with Chris the whole time, and this is the hard part. I texted him and I said, I'm turning in your script. And he said, good luck with that. I hope you work again. And then I made a joke that, I will not repeat. I learned how to make Chris Kyle laugh, and it was a point of pride for me. It took a while, and I think maybe he was just laughing more in general. But I made a joke, and he said LOL, and I turned in the script. I gave the script to the producers on Friday, and the next day was Saturday, and I got a call on Saturday, and they said, Chris was just murdered. And, you spend your time in this guy's head and getting to know him, and then him becoming a friend at the same time that you you take him on, and maybe I do it a little more as an actor, but I try and get into the head of this guy and try and live it. And man, it was, I just wept like a baby. I just wept, and it was I called Bradley, and we sat on the phone. He had been at the VA in Washington D.C. that day, and he spent the whole day with these vets, and then he came out and got this phone call that Chris had been murdered, and it was really rough. It was rough.
So, Sienna, when you joined the project, were you able to also reach out to Taya and take away things that you could apply to your portrayal of her, and also, and specifically in the final, I guess the final scene, when Taya says goodbye to Chris, there is something I thought going on in the look that you give him. And I wondered if that was deliberate, almost as if that there's something coming, and just where, the thought process there.
I did spend a lot of time with Taya. I was in London before I started shooting, and Clint doesn't rehearse, which is an amazing way of working. But I spoke to her via Skype, which is the wonder of the modern world. And then when I got to LA 2 weeks before we started shooting, we spent a lot of time together there. And she's, I had to bear in mind that she's obviously a very different woman now to the woman that she was when I was playing her, because she's in the middle of this incredible grief, and it's so recent. This happened last year, it's unbelievable. But she still managed to retain this kind of energy and openness, and because she never knew whether Chris would come home, she kept everything. So there was an immense amount of source material. Every single email that they ever wrote to each other, Bradley and I read. She filmed him all the time, and was just very open in understanding. I was a new mother at the time when I started shooting this, and that's impossible for any woman. It's a really complicated time, and beautiful but hard. But to try and understand what it would be like to be raising 2 children on your own and not knowing every single day whether your husband would survive was a really interesting headspace to get into, and she was so brilliant and helpful. And that last look was something that Clint added completely off the cuff. It was one take. It wasn't. He just said, when you look out the door, just look and just give me a sense that something might be wrong. Just some sense of intuition. And interestingly, when Chris actually did go out with that guy, he phoned Taya from the gun range and said, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but something's up. But I'll be home soon. And that was the last time they spoke. And I feel like it was maybe a nod to that moment that Clint asked me to do that.
There seem to be certain patterns of things that interest you in terms of what pops up in the films that you choose to make. Obviously, we've seen various aspects of war and also violence and killing as things that you're exploring the different sides of. And I think many of the films that you've acted in, and certainly also Unforgiven, I think, was the ultimate exploration of that. And is that overanalyzing it, or are those themes and subjects that you really are intrigued by?
Yeah, no, I'm intrigued by it, and because in Unforgiven, the character is there. He's got a new guy who just killed somebody, and he's having terrible regrets about it. It's folding up completely, and so it's then you have the old time guy, which is me, who's telling him about that's a hell of a thing to kill somebody, and there's a lot goes on, and I thought about that a lot during this filming this picture too, because a lot must have gone on, even though these people are the enemy. They're killing people that are just military-aged men on the street. They don't know for a fact, and maybe it's somebody who just made a mistake and walked out there, or whatever. But they have the go-ahead to knock somebody off who's just happens to be there. Now, whether he's there, they just kind of figure the odds are he's there for no good. And on what Sienna mentioned on that last thing too, is I have a great respect for intuition and women's intuition, and I thought that I would just kind of do the door thing. I'd just kind of pull the curtain on it. It's like the last time she's ever going to see him, and that something's amiss, and so I tried to use that movement to sell that fact, and But those are things. She used to think that I made it up on the spot, but you're always making up something on the spot. So, and so that's what's fun about making films. Is you can you have a plan, but the plan is always subject to whatever you find in it, and whatever you're learning yourself about the people, about the performers, how they're treating the people. It's always just an evolving process. So it's great fun. That's why I'm still doing it at 28.